I am deeply aware of this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities of sovereignty.
Something about that night has never stopped royal watchers from asking questions. Not because of what was announced publicly, but because of what appeared to be happening behind palace walls long before anyone outside knew a major decision was approaching. While attention remained focused on official engagements and carefully managed appearances, a different story seemed to be unfolding quietly around Catherine, Princess of Wales, and the future of the monarchy itself. For years, the public conversation surrounding the royal family has often revolved around the most visible figures, from King Charles III and Prince William to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Yet experienced royal observers frequently point out that the most significant changes inside the monarchy rarely begin with public statements. Instead, they begin with subtle shifts in influence, private meetings, and decisions that only reveal their true importance much later. And according to the dramatic narrative presented in the reference material, one particular sequence of events allegedly centered on Kate Middleton became the foundation for an extraordinary struggle over power, loyalty, and the future direction of the institution itself. What makes this story especially intriguing is not simply the claim of conflict. Royal history has never been entirely free of disagreement. The more fascinating question is why Catherine, Princess of Wales, emerged as the central figure in a story that revolves around stability, succession, and trust at a time when the monarchy has faced some of its most challenging years in recent memory. To understand why that question matters, it is important to look at the position Kate Middleton occupies within the modern royal family. Unlike many public figures who arrive at positions of influence through sudden promotion, Catherine's role has developed gradually over more than a decade of public service. Every appearance, every royal tour, every carefully observed interaction has contributed to an image of consistency that many supporters of the monarchy view as increasingly valuable. As public attention shifted between controversies involving Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and other royal developments, Catherine, Princess of Wales, often maintained a noticeably steady presence. But was that steadiness merely a matter of public image, or was something more significant taking place behind the scenes? That question becomes even more interesting when examining the broader situation facing Buckingham Palace. King Charles III inherited not only a crown but also the responsibility of guiding the monarchy through an era of intense scrutiny. Every decision, every relationship, and every public appearance now unfolds under the constant attention of global media. In such an environment, influence is not measured only by titles. Influence is measured by trust, credibility, and the ability to unite different parts of the institution during periods of uncertainty. Many royal commentators have argued that Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, increasingly represent the monarchy's future in the minds of the public. While King Charles III remains sovereign, the Prince and Princess of Wales are frequently viewed as the bridge between the current reign and the next generation. That perception alone creates an important dynamic because perceptions inside constitutional institutions often become almost as powerful as formal authority. And this is where the story begins to move beyond personalities and toward something much larger. According to the narrative described in the reference account, the alleged conflict was never simply about individual relationships. It was portrayed as a struggle over who would ultimately safeguard the long-term interests of the monarchy. Whether one accepts those claims or views them purely as dramatic storytelling, the underlying theme resonates with many royal followers because it touches on questions that have existed for centuries. Who protects the institution when competing interests emerge? Who carries the responsibility of preserving public confidence? And who is preparing to lead when the next chapter eventually begins? As those questions gained attention, Catherine, Princess of Wales, appeared increasingly central to discussions about continuity and stability. Royal analysts frequently noted how carefully Kate Middleton managed public expectations during periods when speculation about the future seemed particularly intense. Unlike figures who often generated headlines through controversy, Catherine's influence seemed to grow through restraint, discipline, and consistency. Yet some observers believe that very approach may explain why stories like this gain traction in the first place. After all, when someone rarely seeks attention, every perceived shift becomes more noticeable. When someone remains largely silent, people begin searching for meaning in actions rather than words. And when someone is widely viewed as a future queen, even the smallest developments can trigger enormous speculation about what may be happening behind palace doors. So what exactly convinced some royal watchers that a much larger power struggle was unfolding around Catherine, Princess of Wales? Why did certain events lead commentators to believe that Prince William's household was becoming increasingly influential within the royal family? And perhaps most importantly, what developments allegedly transformed private tensions into a situation that supporters described as a defining moment for the future of the monarchy? Those questions would soon move the story in a far more dramatic direction, because the next stage focuses on the claims, the evidence, and the series of events that allegedly convinced key figures that the balance of power inside the royal household was beginning to change. Before we continue, if you enjoy thoughtful royal analysis, historical context, and in-depth discussions about the royal family, be sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and join the conversation in the comments below. And as the story develops, ask yourself this: was Catherine, Princess of Wales, simply fulfilling her royal duties, or were observers witnessing the early signs of something much more significant within Buckingham Palace? If the claims described in that dramatic account were true, then the alleged operation was never really about one document, one confrontation, or even one individual decision. According to the narrative, the real battle centered on something far more valuable inside any royal institution: information. Not public information, not newspaper headlines, and certainly not the carefully crafted announcements that emerge from Buckingham Palace after major events, but private knowledge about who could be trusted, who held influence, and who might ultimately shape the future direction of the monarchy. And that is precisely where Catherine, Princess of Wales, supposedly began playing a much more significant role than many observers realized. What makes this phase of the story particularly fascinating is that the alleged strategy attributed to Kate Middleton was not based on speed or public confrontation. Instead, the narrative suggests that Catherine, Princess of Wales, relied on patience. While media attention frequently shifted toward Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, and while commentators debated every statement coming from California, the story claims that Kate Middleton was focused on something entirely different. Rather than fighting battles in public view, Catherine, Princess of Wales, allegedly spent months observing patterns, gathering information, and identifying relationships that most people never noticed. But if that interpretation is correct, what exactly was Catherine, Princess of Wales, looking for? According to the account, the answer was surprisingly simple. Catherine, Princess of Wales, allegedly wanted to determine whether unusual decisions were isolated incidents or part of a larger pattern. Royal institutions function through procedure, tradition, and continuity. Therefore, whenever unexpected changes begin appearing repeatedly, experienced insiders often pay close attention. The narrative suggests that Kate Middleton gradually became concerned that a series of developments, each seemingly insignificant on its own, might actually be connected to something much larger. And this is where another question emerges. If concerns truly existed, why wouldn't Prince William, the future king, simply address them directly? Why wouldn't King Charles III intervene immediately? Why would any future queen choose observation instead of action? Supporters of the theory presented in the reference narrative argue that Catherine, Princess of Wales, understood a fundamental reality of royal life. Allegations without evidence can create enormous damage, particularly within a family that already faces constant scrutiny from global media. Any accusation that could not be supported would risk harming not only individuals but the institution itself. As a result, the story portrays Kate Middleton as someone who believed patience would ultimately prove more effective than confrontation. Whether viewers agree with that interpretation or not, it introduces a compelling dynamic because patience often appears passive from the outside while actually serving a strategic purpose behind the scenes. Royal history contains numerous examples where waiting became more powerful than acting immediately. The question is whether Catherine, Princess of Wales, was truly engaged in such a process, or whether later observers simply projected significance onto ordinary events. What do you think? Would a future queen be more likely to act quickly, or would a future queen first ensure every piece of information had been carefully verified? As the narrative continues, another layer begins to emerge involving several members of the royal family who allegedly shared concerns about the long-term stability of the institution. Among the figures mentioned most prominently are Princess Anne and Prince Edward. For many royal followers, that detail immediately attracts attention because Princess Anne has long been regarded as one of the hardest-working and most respected members of the royal family. Meanwhile, Prince Edward has traditionally maintained a lower public profile while remaining closely connected to the operational side of royal duties. According to the account, Catherine, Princess of Wales, allegedly recognized that preserving credibility required more than personal conviction. The Princess of Wales supposedly needed trusted allies capable of evaluating information independently. In other words, the narrative presents an alleged alliance built not around ambition but around institutional preservation. Yet even if such cooperation existed, another problem remained. Information alone rarely changes anything. Evidence must be verified, motives must be understood, consequences must be considered, and perhaps most importantly, any action affecting the future of the monarchy would require an extraordinary degree of certainty. That challenge becomes increasingly important when considering King Charles III. Throughout much of the public discussion surrounding the royal family, King Charles III is often portrayed as balancing modern pressures against centuries of tradition. Any development capable of influencing succession planning, royal authority, or institutional trust would inevitably affect King Charles III directly. Consequently, the narrative suggests that the alleged effort attributed to Catherine, Princess of Wales, eventually became less about gathering information and more about determining how much King Charles III actually knew. That question alone changes the entire story, because if King Charles III was unaware, then the situation becomes one type of crisis. But if King Charles III was aware and facing difficult choices behind closed doors, then the situation becomes something entirely different. Can you see why royal watchers became so fascinated by this possibility? The more the narrative develops, the more the focus shifts away from individual personalities and toward competing responsibilities. Prince William, the future king, represents continuity. Catherine, Princess of Wales, represents stability. King Charles III represents current leadership. Each role carries different obligations, and according to the account, those obligations were beginning to collide in ways that could not remain hidden indefinitely. Meanwhile, public attention continued moving elsewhere. Headlines remained focused on Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Discussions surrounding previous controversies continued dominating commentary. Social media conversations generated fresh debates almost daily. Yet according to supporters of this theory, those distractions may have allowed more significant developments to unfold unnoticed inside royal circles. And that possibility introduces perhaps the most intriguing question of all. What if the most important royal story was never the one appearing on front pages? What if the real story involved preparations for the monarchy's future rather than arguments about its present? As weeks allegedly turned into months, the narrative claims that Catherine, Princess of Wales, and Prince William gradually reached a point where observation alone was no longer enough. Information had supposedly been collected, concerns had allegedly been discussed, questions had reportedly been examined from multiple angles. Yet one critical obstacle remained standing in the way: the alleged existence of a document. Not just any document, according to the story, but a document that supposedly carried extraordinary significance because of its connection to Queen Elizabeth II and the future structure of royal authority itself. Whether viewers believe such claims or view them as dramatic speculation, that alleged document becomes the centerpiece of everything that follows. And once the search for that document begins, the story moves from quiet observation into a far more dangerous phase, because finding answers is one thing, but proving them is something else entirely. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this deep dive into royal history, royal mysteries, and the evolving role of Catherine, Princess of Wales, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share your thoughts below. Because the next part of the story raises an even larger question. If such a document truly existed, who knew where it was hidden? And what would happen if its contents completely changed the balance of power inside the royal family? The alleged search for that document marked a turning point in the story because, according to the narrative, Catherine, Princess of Wales, was no longer dealing with questions, suspicions, or fragments of information. The focus had shifted toward proof, and throughout royal history, proof has often been the dividing line between rumor and reality, between private concern and institutional action, between a troubling possibility and a decision that could alter the future of the monarchy itself. What makes this stage particularly compelling is that the story suddenly becomes less about personalities and more about risk. According to the account, Catherine, Princess of Wales, Prince William, the future king, princess, and Prince Edward allegedly understood that any attempt to uncover hidden information would carry enormous consequences. If nothing was found, the entire effort would appear misguided. If something significant was discovered, however, the implications could reach the highest levels of Buckingham Palace. And that raises an important question for viewers. If you believe the future of an institution depended on finding the truth, how far would you go to uncover it? According to the narrative, the answer lay not within public records, newspaper archives, or official statements, but deep within royal history itself. The story claims that references began surfacing to an extraordinary document allegedly connected to Queen Elizabeth II. Not a document discussed openly, not a document known to the public, but a document described as a safeguard intended for moments of institutional uncertainty. Whether such claims have any basis in reality is highly debatable, yet within the narrative, the possibility alone was enough to change everything. As Catherine, Princess of Wales, allegedly pursued that lead, the search reportedly became increasingly urgent. The reason was simple. Time was no longer viewed as an advantage. Time was becoming a threat. According to the account, every passing week created opportunities for evidence to disappear, relationships to shift, and information to be concealed. In stories involving power, the side that controls information often controls the outcome. The narrative suggests that Kate Middleton understood that reality better than anyone involved. Yet another complication soon emerged. Even if the document existed, locating it would be extraordinarily difficult. Royal archives are not ordinary collections of paperwork. Generations of history, correspondence, ceremonial records, constitutional materials, and private documents have accumulated over decades and, in some cases, centuries. Finding one specific item within such an environment would require more than determination. It would require knowledge, access, and perhaps most importantly, trust. This is where Prince Edward allegedly became a central figure in the story. Unlike Prince William, whose role naturally attracts public attention, or Catherine, Princess of Wales, whose visibility places constant scrutiny on every move, Prince Edward has often operated far from media headlines. Because of that lower profile, the narrative presents Prince Edward as uniquely positioned to handle sensitive responsibilities without attracting attention. According to the account, Prince Edward allegedly began tracing references connected to the mysterious document while maintaining complete discretion. No dramatic announcements, no public confrontations, no visible signs that anything unusual was taking place. Instead, the story describes a methodical effort designed to avoid detection while pursuing answers that could reshape the internal balance of influence within the royal family. But here is where the story becomes even more intriguing. What if the greatest challenge was not finding the document? What if the greatest challenge was understanding why it had allegedly been hidden in the first place? Think about that for a moment. Documents are preserved because they matter. Documents are protected because they carry significance. Yet the narrative suggests that this particular item was not merely stored away. It was deliberately concealed, almost as though its contents were intended for a specific moment rather than a specific person. Could that really be true? Or is that precisely the kind of mystery that keeps royal stories alive for years? As the alleged search intensified, the narrative claims that Catherine, Princess of Wales, became increasingly convinced that the issue extended beyond individual relationships. The Princess of Wales supposedly viewed the situation through the lens of continuity and legacy. From that perspective, the question was no longer who held influence today. The question was who would preserve stability tomorrow. That distinction matters because monarchy is fundamentally different from ordinary institutions. Political leaders come and go. Governments change. Public opinion shifts. Yet monarchies survive by creating continuity across generations. According to supporters of the theory, that long-term perspective shaped every alleged decision involving Catherine, Princess of Wales, and Prince William. And then, according to the narrative, the breakthrough finally arrived. The story describes a moment when information gathered over months allegedly converged into a single lead pointing toward a highly restricted archive. Suddenly, what had once seemed speculative appeared potentially reachable. For the first time, the possibility of locating the mysterious document seemed real. Yet reaching that point only created a new dilemma. Because discovering a document is one thing, interpreting its meaning is something entirely different. Imagine finding a centuries-old record connected to royal authority. Imagine discovering language written for circumstances that no longer exist in exactly the same form. Imagine trying to determine whether historical intentions should influence modern decisions. Such questions would challenge constitutional experts, historians, and royal advisors alike. So ask yourself this: if Catherine, Princess of Wales, had truly encountered something extraordinary, would public disclosure strengthen the monarchy or create even greater uncertainty? According to the account, that debate allegedly became a source of tension behind closed doors. Some figures supposedly viewed action as necessary. Others allegedly favored caution. Some reportedly believed clarity would restore confidence. Others feared unintended consequences. What makes the narrative compelling is that nobody emerges as entirely certain. Instead, the story presents a group of individuals facing difficult choices while attempting to balance duty, loyalty, reputation, and responsibility. Whether viewers see that portrayal as credible or purely dramatic storytelling, it introduces complexity that goes beyond simple heroes and villains. And just when it appeared that answers might finally be within reach, another development threatened to change the entire situation. According to the narrative, the alleged document was not the only secret waiting to emerge. There were whispers of additional information. There were suggestions that long-buried issues connected to King Charles III could resurface. There were claims that competing factions inside the broader royal environment might react in unpredictable ways if certain details became known. In other words, finding the document may have been only the beginning. The real challenge was deciding what would happen after the discovery. Before we move into the next chapter, where the alleged contents of the document and the reaction surrounding King Charles III become central to the story, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and join the discussion below. Because the next development raises a question that may be even more important than the document itself. If a hidden safeguard truly existed, why would Queen Elizabeth II allegedly believe the future of the monarchy might one day require it? By the time the alleged document had finally been located, according to the narrative, the atmosphere surrounding the situation had changed completely. What began as a search for answers was now becoming a test of judgment. Because finding something hidden is often the easy part. Deciding what to do with that discovery is where the real challenge begins. And in this version of events, Catherine, Princess of Wales, suddenly found herself standing at the center of a decision that could affect not only King Charles III and Prince William, the future king, but also the broader perception of the royal family itself. What makes this stage of the story particularly dramatic is that the alleged discovery did not instantly solve every question. In fact, according to the narrative, the discovery created even more uncertainty. The reason was simple. Information can clarify the past, but information can also complicate the future. Once a secret is uncovered, every person involved must decide whether revealing the truth serves the institution or threatens it. And that raises a fascinating question for viewers. If you discovered something that could reshape public understanding of the monarchy, would transparency always be the correct choice? Or are there moments when protecting stability becomes equally important? According to the account, that exact dilemma allegedly confronted Catherine, Princess of Wales, Prince William, Princess Anne, and Prince Edward. The narrative suggests that what they uncovered was significant not merely because of its contents, but because of its connection to Queen Elizabeth II. Whether viewers consider that plausible or purely fictional, the symbolism attached to Queen Elizabeth II carries enormous weight. For many people throughout the United Kingdom and across the Commonwealth, Queen Elizabeth II represented continuity, duty, and institutional endurance during decades of social and political change. Because of that legacy, any suggestion that Queen Elizabeth II might have anticipated future challenges immediately attracts attention. But why would Queen Elizabeth II allegedly feel the need to prepare safeguards at all? That question sits at the heart of this chapter. Supporters of the narrative argue that Queen Elizabeth II spent more than 70 years observing how power, public opinion, media influence, and family relationships could interact in unpredictable ways. During such an extraordinary reign, Queen Elizabeth II witnessed crises, controversies, and constitutional challenges that would have overwhelmed many institutions. As a result, the story proposes that Queen Elizabeth II understood the importance of contingency planning better than almost anyone else. Whether that interpretation is accurate remains open to debate. Yet within the narrative, the alleged document was portrayed as evidence that Queen Elizabeth II believed future generations might one day face circumstances requiring extraordinary measures. And if that were true, the implications would be enormous. Imagine being Catherine, Princess of Wales in that moment. Imagine realizing that a document connected to Queen Elizabeth II might influence decisions involving King Charles III. Imagine understanding that Prince William, the future king, could eventually inherit the consequences of whatever happened next. Would caution become the priority, or would action become unavoidable? According to the account, those questions reportedly dominated private discussions. The narrative claims that Catherine, Princess of Wales, increasingly viewed the situation through the lens of long-term legacy rather than short-term advantage. The Princess of Wales allegedly understood that future generations would judge outcomes, not intentions. Therefore, every decision had to be measured not only against present circumstances, but also against how history might eventually interpret those choices. That perspective introduces another intriguing dimension. Because throughout modern royal history, Catherine, Princess of Wales, has frequently been described as disciplined, patient, and deliberate. Even critics often acknowledge that Kate Middleton rarely appears impulsive. Consequently, the narrative portrays Catherine, Princess of Wales, as someone determined to avoid creating unnecessary instability, even while confronting increasingly difficult realities. Yet another question soon emerged. What role did King Charles III play in all of this? Up to this point, much of the narrative focuses on Catherine, Princess of Wales, and the alleged search for answers. However, according to the story, the situation ultimately revolved around King Charles III. Any significant institutional decision would inevitably require confronting a difficult reality. The reigning monarch remained the central figure around whom the entire constitutional structure operated. And this is where the narrative becomes more emotionally complex. Rather than depicting King Charles III as a simple obstacle, the story presents King Charles III as a figure carrying the accumulated weight of decades. Long before becoming monarch, King Charles III spent much of adult life navigating public expectations, family pressures, and intense media scrutiny. Whether discussing relationships, succession, or public perception, King Charles III has often found himself at the intersection of competing demands. According to the narrative, Catherine, Princess of Wales, allegedly recognized that reality. The Princess of Wales supposedly understood that institutional challenges rarely exist in isolation. Decisions affecting the monarchy also affect people. Behind every title stands a human being confronting personal consequences. Therefore, the story suggests that any eventual conversation involving King Charles III required not only evidence but also empathy. What do you think about that? Can a monarchy balance institutional necessity with personal loyalty, or does one inevitably outweigh the other when major decisions must be made? As these tensions allegedly intensified, another factor entered the equation: public perception. Even if every internal issue were resolved perfectly, public confidence would remain essential. Modern monarchies survive not through force but through legitimacy. Public trust is therefore one of the institution's most valuable assets. According to the narrative, Catherine, Princess of Wales, and Prince William increasingly recognized that reality. The future of the monarchy depended not only on resolving internal concerns, but also on preserving confidence among millions of people who looked to the royal family as a symbol of continuity. And that realization reportedly changed the strategy. Rather than focusing exclusively on private discussions, attention allegedly shifted toward preparing for how future developments might eventually be understood by the public. In other words, the challenge was no longer simply discovering the truth. The challenge was ensuring that truth strengthened rather than weakened the institution. Yet just as the situation appeared to be moving toward resolution, the narrative introduces one final complication. According to the account, not everyone was prepared to accept the emerging reality. Questions remained unresolved. Relationships remained strained. Competing interests remained active. And perhaps most importantly, the alleged discovery of the document did not eliminate resistance. If anything, the narrative suggests that resistance became more determined precisely because the stakes had become so high. Can you see why this moment matters? For much of the story, the focus has been on searching, investigating, and uncovering information. But now the narrative is approaching something far more consequential: confrontation. The next phase is not about what was found. The next phase is about how key figures responded once the implications became impossible to ignore. Before we move into the final chapter, where the alleged confrontation surrounding King Charles III reaches its climax, and the broader question of the monarchy's future comes into focus, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share your perspective in the comments. Because the next development forces us to confront the biggest question of all: when loyalty to individuals collides with loyalty to an institution, which responsibility ultimately prevails? And that brings us to the moment where the narrative reaches its most consequential question, because according to the account, the alleged discovery was never meant to create a public spectacle. The purpose, supporters of a story argue, was to force clarity. After months of uncertainty, speculation, and quiet investigation, Catherine, Princess of Wales, and Prince William, the future king, allegedly found themselves confronting a reality that could no longer remain suspended between suspicion and certainty. What makes this final chapter so fascinating is that the story ultimately becomes less about power and more about responsibility. Throughout the narrative, Catherine, Princess of Wales, is repeatedly portrayed not as someone seeking greater authority, but as someone attempting to protect continuity. Whether viewers believe that interpretation or not, the distinction matters because history often remembers motives very differently from actions. A decision that appears controversial in the present can look entirely different decades later when viewed through the lens of legacy. And that raises an important question for you. When future historians look back on this period of royal history, will the defining story be the controversy surrounding Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, or will the defining story be the emergence of Catherine, Princess of Wales, as a central figure in shaping the monarchy's next chapter? According to the narrative, that question was already beginning to answer itself. As public attention continued shifting from one headline to another, the reputation of Kate Middleton appeared to remain remarkably resilient. Polls, commentary, and public appearances frequently reinforced the perception that Catherine, Princess of Wales, represented stability during a period when stability often seemed difficult to find. Meanwhile, Prince William, the future king, increasingly appeared alongside Catherine, Princess of Wales, as part of a partnership many supporters viewed as essential to the monarchy's future. Yet even that observation leads to another mystery. Was this evolution the result of careful planning, or was it simply the natural consequence of years spent preparing for future responsibilities? The answer may depend entirely on how one interprets the events surrounding King Charles III. Some observers believe King Charles III is guiding a deliberate transition toward the next generation of leadership. Others argue that King Charles III remains firmly committed to defining the current reign on its own terms. Both interpretations continue to generate debate among royal commentators, and both perspectives highlight just how uncertain the future can appear, even within institutions built on tradition. What do you think? Do you see Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, as the undisputed future of the monarchy, or do you believe King Charles III still has many significant chapters left to write before that transition becomes reality? Perhaps the most interesting aspect of the entire story is that certainty remains elusive. The alleged document, the reported tensions, the supposed preparations, and the claims surrounding Queen Elizabeth II all exist within a narrative filled with unanswered questions. Some viewers may interpret those unanswered questions as evidence that something significant occurred behind palace walls. Other viewers may view the story as an example of how mystery naturally develops around institutions that value privacy. Either way, the fascination persists. Because at its heart, this story is not really about paperwork, palace corridors, or secret meetings. This story is about legacy. This story is about who carries responsibility when history places extraordinary expectations on a small number of individuals. And this story is about whether Catherine, Princess of Wales, and Prince William, the future king, are already shaping the monarchy's future in ways the public has only begun to understand. As the royal family continues evolving, one reality remains impossible to ignore. The decisions made today will influence how future generations remember King Charles III, Prince William, Catherine, Princess of Wales, Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and every major figure connected to this remarkable chapter in royal history. And perhaps that is why stories like this continue capturing public attention. Not because every claim can be proven, not because every mystery can be solved, but because the future of the monarchy remains one of the most fascinating ongoing stories in the world. So before we end, we would love to hear your perspective. Do you believe Catherine, Princess of Wales, has quietly become the most influential figure in the future of the royal family? Do you think King Charles III is actively preparing the path for Prince William and Kate Middleton, or do you believe commentators are reading too much into ordinary royal developments? And if Queen Elizabeth II could see the monarchy today, what role do you think Queen Elizabeth II would expect Catherine, Princess of Wales, to play in the years ahead? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because this conversation is far from over. And if you enjoyed this deep royal analysis, be sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and join our growing community of royal watchers. Thank you for spending time with us today, and don't miss our next story, because another surprising development involving Prince William, Catherine, Princess of Wales, King Charles III, Prince Harry, and Meghan Markle may already be changing the conversation in ways few people expected. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep watching.